come in the way of climate change. But what we do know is that projects like these, once they have a foothold in a community, not only take what is contracted, but can also place a great deal of pressure on elected officials to take even more. Niagara Bottling Company might very well be a family-run business, but it is to the tune of a $300 million profit per year selling water through Costco and Walmart, chains across America. It is my opinion that corporate concerns is profit and not people. Mayor Shane Gallagher and Superintendent Judy Hansen believed that they could place stipulations in a Niagara agreement that gives the public first priority in the case of drought. So far, given the way this process has been handled, it is reasonable to believe that their notion is naive. Already, many assumptions have been made, such as a decision to send out a will share letter, or to even consider supporting the sale of the public's water source, without it ever going to the public first to inquire. All of what is happening today, and with the upcoming presentations by the Water Board in the weeks ahead, is occurring because of public pressure. None of this was offered at the onset. Or how about the way the seeker at EAF was handled and submitted? Some of our former elected officials have cried, let the seeker process play itself out, when the city of Kingston and possibly other agencies and municipalities are not even listed for what would be a fair review. So for these reasons and more, I am submitting draft text and requesting that our council, as elected officials and residents of Kingston, to work on a resolution to pass that protects our surface and groundwater for not only us, but generations to come. The people have the same common interest here and must protect natural resources for the benefit of the public, not as a commodity to bottle and to sell. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay, so the first couple of speakers, we allowed a little more time. It's been an hour for 6 speakers. We have 30 to go. We've only done 1/6, and we've been at it an hour. So that would be 6 hours. So anyway, I would like the next speakers to try and stay within the 3-minute allotted time, if you would, please. Like I said, we still have a whole council meeting after this public speaking.
What's our idea?
Next speaker, please.
Raji Nevin. Hello, my name is Raji Nevin. I live in Woodstock, New York. What I'm going to read to you tonight was actually taken from some of the letters to the editor that were recently written in the Freeman, coupled with some remarks of my own. Selling pure water to yet another corporation to be bottled and resold should be a crime. Clean water is one of our most precious natural resources in the American Northeast. Every drop from every faucet needs to be appreciated and not taken for granted. The people here tonight to speak on this issue do not take it for granted. Kingston City government, I ask you to please educate yourselves on this issue thoroughly. The loss of almost 2 million gallons of water a day of a rare, life-giving, endangered resource should absolutely take priority over water, our most precious resource, will potentially become more important to us than oil in the not-so-distant future. It simply is not a prudent way to treat this resource as a commodity by selling Cooper Lake water to a giant in the bottling industry. If this decision is made, more giants will come, guaranteed. Our community water is and should remain for use within our local ecosystem, as we very well may need this water for things such as agriculture, population growth, recreation, and or other local and unknown concerns that could very well arise in our near future. Please do the right thing. Keep our local water local, not bottled for sale elsewhere.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Joan Astor.
So, to all of the comments and council members, I pondered before making my comments tonight because there's so many things that I want to say about why I strongly suggest that you decline and refuse the proposal for the Niagara Water Bottling Company. I've selected to talk about a larger issue that was touched upon briefly, upon which your decision, your right decision, rests. I feel confident that when you see the greater implications, you will be able to make a clear decision. The larger issue is the role of the single-serve plastic water bottling industry. Which contributes to the devastation of health and environment worldwide. Deny the proposal from the Niagara Water Company. Deny the proposal from the Niagara Bottling Company in a step to eliminate one of the biggest dangers to our health and our environment. It's our opportunity now to think in terms of stopping the promotion of the plastic water bottle. Single-serve bottle industry, we are contributing directly to the devastation of life on this earth. Americans use 80 million single-serve plastic bottles daily. 4 out of 5 bottles, 30 million a year, end up in landfills. It will take approximately 1,000 years for a plastic water bottle to biodegrade. The plastic bottles in which bottled water is typically sold are made of PET. The manufacturer of these bottles release phthalates, which have been found to cause birth defects in animals, and they go into the environment. Plastic bottles contain BPA. I'm not going to get into the scientific terms here. One of the most toxic chemicals which leaches into our water. It's recently been banned from baby bottles by the FDA, but recently. It's in your sports bottles, it's in your water coolers, it's everywhere. BPA mimics the female hormone estrogen, which may have detrimental effects including cancer of the brain, breast and prostate cancer, decreased testosterone levels in men, and is particularly devastating to babies and young children. There are people all over the world taking action on this issue right now. I was very heartened to read about the Rockefeller heirs announcing they are divesting their holdings in the fossil fuel. That means petroleum, coal, and natural gas. Hawaii, there were over 26 pieces of plastic in one fish. In the Central Pacific Ocean, there's a huge soup of plastic, twice the size of Texas. The Eastern Garbage Patch contains all of our trash, from Asia to the west coast of America. This is repeated in the North and South Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, and the South Pacific. Samples of ocean water contain 46 times more plastic than plankton. This is poison to the sea creatures. I urge you to protect the use of water for the public, not for the profit concerns of the corporations. We need policies in place to protect our precious water. You have a choice now to choose between the environmental and health concerns of this industry versus job loss and economic short-term benefit. You have to decide which one has priority. From my point of view, we cannot, in good conscience at this time in history, choose to continue polluting our planet even one more second. Deny the proposal and deny access.
Something everybody should know about this particular company is that they are in league with Monsanto and Nestle's sponsoring, funding $7 million to oppose GMO labeling products. So I think that's an interesting note about Niagara. And we don't want to do business with that kind of a company. And
just, start from the beginning. As can be expected, the town of Woodstock, as an interested party, will protect its rights and its watershed, as enshrined in the 1929 and 1954 decisions of the state agency precursor of the DEC. And we will seek to ensure that the protocols the DEC recently required of us to extend our water service to our own residents shall be no less stringent than the protocols required of the Kingston Water Board to extend its water service to other municipalities. In 1929, the state agency, precursor to the DEC, permitted the intake of water into the Kingston water supply from Woodstock's two major streams, and I'm quoting, except that no water shall be diverted when the natural flow of said streams below such intakes would be equal to or less than 500,000 gallons a day. The same decision states, except with the further consent and approval of this commission, the city of Kingston shall not supply or distribute for any purpose any water from such portions of its system unless it, or the taker of the water, shall have previously obtained such consent or approval. The same decision states, nothing in this approval shall be construed as giving the city of Kingston rights in the watersheds above described and above the proposed points of diversion superior to those of the inhabitants of such watersheds. And I'm talking about the people of the town of Woodstock. The same decision states with qualifications. The Commission reserves full liberty to authorize any portion of the town of Woodstock to be supplied with water from any part of the Sauk Hill, whether the points of diversion be above or below the intakes or reservoirs of the city of Kingston. The same decision states with qualifications. The city of Kingston shall furnish water to any publicly or privately owned water supply system situated in the town of Woodstock. And the purpose of the aforesaid is to remind everyone there are conditions under which the permitted taking of water from the Woodstock watersheds has been established. And two, that the DEC continues to act as an involved agency. And this is implicit in the 1929 decision. Pursuant to the conditions of the 1929 decision, the city of Kingston in 1954 sought and received the approval for connection from the water conduit supplying Kingston to the internal water system supply of the International Business Machines Corporation in the town of Ulster, in which the town of Kingston Board of Water Commissioners have not heretofore legally supplied water in large quantities, close quote. Among the 21 findings of fact of the 1954 Water Power and Control Commission, precursor to the DEC, is number 15. The officials of the city of Kingston should be made aware of the fact that by meeting the demands of the new IBM plant, the limit of the capacity of its water supply facilities will be closely approached. Possible further increased use of the city itself may make it necessary for Kingston to seek out new and additional sources of water supply. This condition could further be aggravated by the expected development of the areas surrounding the city to provide housing for personnel of the new plant and the resulting requests for water service there too. So again, I just may go back to my conclusion. This proposal to divert 1.75 million gallons of water of Kingston water to the bottom after a stealthy gestation was suddenly birthed as a declaration of intent to be lead agency by a municipality where the water is not drawn, and thus potentially a secret determination will not be made by the representatives of the city for whom the water is intended. The people of the town of Woodstock are concerned with this, that my space should be of even greater concern, obviously this, to the residents of Kingston. As such, our peoples are partners and not adversaries. That said, the declaration of lead agency for a separate secret review of the sale of water intended for Kingston residents might be a consideration of Kingston County Council. Thank you very much.
Next speaker, please.
Alan Thompson.
My name's Alan Thompson, and I'm at 163 Churchill Road.
163 Churchill Road. as 1 million gallons a day, 1.75 million gallons a day. I've also heard it described as 10% of our area's rainfall. As laypersons, we have no way to fact-check these numbers. We know that the corporations have a built-in conflict of interest. We know that our water department seems a little too eager for this latest corporate giveaway. The will share letter seems to be jumping way ahead, too fast, too soon, while we sit here in the dark waiting for information. Historically, government relies too much on industry for their answers. We need a new accountability. And we will vote accordingly. Whose numbers should we trust? Only real scientists, uninterested in the outcome. These scientists aren't free. Who's going to pay for them? In fact, these scientists that are uninterested in the outcome, they have trouble getting funding in this corporate playground since they won't toe the line. So who chooses which scientists to hire? This is all very murky to me. Very murky. We are not convinced that you have our best interests at heart. Your actions, your talk of surplus water, this would all seem to confirm our fears. How can this be considered a good investment? We are evolving away from a plastic disposable society. Bottled water in plastic bottles is already banned for sale on public property in San Francisco. Plastic shopping bags are completely banned in the entire state of California. This plastic becomes an enormous problem for marine life and birds. The actual use of plastic bottles for drinking water is objectionable. Why is tap water passed over as not good enough for today? Do toxins in tap water have anything to do with this trend? Who is responsible for this possible contamination that people are trying to avoid by buying bottled water? Is it not you? Is it not the people here? I mean, the water departments, the representatives. What I'm trying to say is, who's responsible for this contamination? The fluoride added? Is it not you, our representatives, our water departments? How can we reverse this trend of buying drinking water? By enabling Nestle in our own backyard? Any idiot can manifest a few jobs by liquidating the environment. But that is not what we expect from our public officials. A public servant is supposed to come equipped with a set of ethics. Their job is actually closer to that of a steward of the land, a protector of the people. Not playing Cupid with us and the devil. That's not what we had in mind. Now that you are on our radar, perhaps we will organize and vote against you until we get people to do the job right. Rather than corporate giveaways, we need investment in local businesses. We need investment in real people, actual small businesses here, not some company from 3,000 miles away, trying to use us to pump up their value as they sell out to Nestle Corporation. Sure, perhaps generating 120 jobs looks good on a politician's resume. Is that what this is really about? Jobs? The jobs we are promised for this sacrificial taking. How do we know there won't be layoffs? How do we know they won't bring in cheaper workers later? They always do that, if you've been paying attention. How do we know they won't automate their process and lay off people because of the automation? Is it going to be just truck drivers? The reason there are no jobs in the first place is because we let the big corporations do as they please. So it's more about the hardly help our position. We don't believe the things they say anymore. Any company driving 50 trucks a day in and out of here should not have us paying for road repairs during and after their 3 years of accident. How do we not thought this thing through? I mean, who pays for the roads they bust up with the water trucks? We won't just pay for everything to get nothing. For nothing but a weak, non-binding promise of some jobs. We've seen this movie before and we refuse. There will be no dumping in the Socus Creek. Completely out of the question. This is going the wrong way. We want clean creeks, clean rivers, and clean lakes. Absolutely no industrial dumping will be tolerated, from the plastics manufacturing or anything else. This battle is not for sale.
Next speaker, please.
Jim Davis.
Ladies and gentlemen, I speak to you tonight not as a concerned citizen from Bearsville that lives 1.65 miles southeast of Cooper Lake Reservoir on the old Indian Blueberry Trail, but rather as a representative of the Anishinaabe Nation in South Central Canada, and shown us William Fernando, our historian, genealogist, and prophecy keeper, who we promised, my wife and I, to speak on their behalf whenever they couldn't be here. And I'm proud to do that this evening. Most of you don't know Cooper Lake was the crux, the center point of Anishinaabe ceremonial educational territory. Our lands went from Newfoundland to Minnesota, from South Central Canada to South Central Virginia, and 4 times a year the people would come together in and around Cooper Lake. That was documented when the reservoir was being built. And if Shomas William was here tonight, the first thing he would do would be to thank the Kingston city officials and the water department for their compassion and their memory of our people. Because there was a grandmother's teaching stone where that reservoir is today. And out of respect, Public Works Department, with no automobile or truck, they hadn't been invented yet, carted that stone, about the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, down to Academy Green and gave it a place of honor and respect. Put a plaque there for our people that came before. And irony was never missed by Grandfather William. You'd have seen the Kingston water letterhead with only tap water delivers. And he'd get a real giggle out of that tonight. I'll tell you what. He surely would. He would also tell you that when he was a young man, he met many of the Niagara people. Because they were a people that lived on and around Niagara Falls. And he would think it very strange that this California company stole their name. And would probably find it more offensive than the Washington Redskins football team. He said, insult to injury, we're going to call this facility here in Ulster the Arrowhead Bottling Company, which is on Ulster's town logo and my hat. I think you'd get a giggle out of that. You wouldn't think it's so funny that Paul Grabauer, CEO of Nestle, when interviewed a few short weeks ago and asked, "Sir, do you not think it unethical to be trying to buy up the whole world's freshwater drinking supply?" And his response was no. By charging a lot of money for it, people will have more respect for it and stop wasting it. And I'll make a few more $1 million. In the 1890s and before, here in the city of Kingston, county of Ulster, if anyone that unscrupulous came to our area and tried to build us, we would have an escort committee to take them out of town. And it would include a piece of split rail fence, a bucket of tar, and several pillowcases full of wood feathers. Thank you for listening to me.
Next speaker, please.
Karen Wolf.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Karen Wolf, and I do not live in the city of Kingston, but I live in Phoenicia, in Ulster County. And I'm concerned about this issue because I think it affects not only the city of Kingston, all of Ulster County, New York State, and the country. And I think it sets a dangerous precedent. My concerns tonight have been addressed by many people who spoke before, so I'll speak to only one issue now, which is the public interest and government's responsibility to represent it. This is a public water supply, and government should do what is necessary to protect it in the best interest of the people, because water is essential to life. Niagara, as has been said before, will pull up to 1.75 million gallons a day of a water supply. We'll dump over 300,000 gallons of wastewater a day in resurface. We'll generate more than 6.5 tons of solid waste every month. We'll seek a 10-year tax abatement so that they're not contributing to the infrastructure. We'll run a pipeline causing major disruptions on roads in our communities. We'll put 250 plus trucks per day on a road, stressing our bridges, our roads, and our infrastructure. They will provide a small number of low-paying dead-end jobs, and they will create greater risks of water shortages in the area. None of this is in the public interest. And I'm asking you tonight to think about this and to think about your roles in representing the public interest here. There are many more ways to provide money than selling our water. I call on the City of Kingston, Ulster County, and New York State to adopt the public trust doctrine, stating that our natural resources belong to the public and are not for sale. That they cannot be sold or privately owned or controlled. Government must manage resources for the present and future generations in a way that is sustainable and protects the public interest. I urge you to do the right thing. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Elizabeth Simonson.
Thank you, Common Council, for letting me speak. I'm from the town of Woodstock. I know that we've heard probably about the assumption that the town of Woodstock might have, what Jeremy was talking about, that their main interest would be the contractual obligations. But I want to share with you my personal problem with what's been proposed with the Cooper Lake Reservoir. I live at 3906 Route 212 in Lake Hill, directly across from the reservoir. In the early summer of 2002, which the gentleman from Water Watch referenced, there was a drought, and it was the lowest level I'd ever seen on the reservoir. I've lived there for 25, well, at that point, probably about 20 years. We lost our water for the first time. We have a 300-plus foot well at the house. So we had to call Titan Drilling from Artville to come out, and they convinced
convinced us that we had to buy a new pump, that during this kind of drought, when the water level at Cooper Lake goes down to that level, this is a normal thing that's going to happen to your wells. That you will lose water. It will come back, but because the groundwater infiltration is not that steady of flow, because of the hydraulic pressure from the lake, you will be out of water for a certain amount of time, which we were. We would be out of water for sometimes 6 hours until the pump could bring it back to a level where we would have drinking water. So I want to look at this as being a good neighbor, and I want the water board commissioners to also think of it as being a good neighbor. There's not many of us that live around Cooper Lake because the town of Woodstock many years ago adopted a very stringent zoning law to protect resources. But what I want to know is, after hearing Mr. Clunan, he said that they would have the ability to turn off the spigot. Now I want to know who's going to protect my spigot. I don't think this would keep spigot, but I want to know some chances that it's going to be done. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Lawrence Nelson.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I live in Lake Hill. My name is George Nelson, and my personal address is as easy to access as Niagara's track record. Niagara has lawsuits with small towns over taxes, over permits. They are fighting in many towns all over this nation right now, winning rights to increasing their pumping of water over cities' objections. They're violating state water codes by discharging pollutants and for not properly containing the chemicals in their outdoor facilities. They have failed to file reports of waste discharge prior to discharging them and have had their own bottles removed from shelves due to unsafe and potentially lethal levels of sodium chloride. Is this the kind of company you want to get involved with? I urge you, it is not. Reservoir. The definition is a large natural or artificial place where water is collected and stored for use, supplying a community, irrigating land, and furnishing power. The word reservoir means to reserve. Reserve means to refrain from using or disposing of and retain for future use. I urge you to think about 7 generations from now. Not short-term goals, because many cities in this country right now are being sued for more than the price of fixing your pipeline infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Elizabeth Miller.
Thank you for letting me speak. I'm a relatively new Kingstonian coming from Brooklyn about 9 months ago. Thank you. I live in Ward 3. Brad Will is my alderman. Again, it's Elizabeth Miller, and my address is 42 Linderman Avenue. I have several concerns, many of which have been addressed already, but one of them, the availability of water to Kingston in the event of a drought, has been addressed in terms of surplus. But to me, the concept of surplus water it doesn't make sense. There is no such thing as surplus water. Water that we have now that we're not using, we may need to use next year if there's a drought. Then there's a question of liability in this contract that the city may create with Niagara. Okay, maybe in the event of a surplus, Niagara will say, okay, you won't give us water. contractual obligation can be met. Nobody has mentioned that fact at all. It's pretty clear, Niagara understands the value of water. Because if water was not valuable, they wouldn't be interested in us. There was an article in the Times yesterday about a town, an entire community in California that has no water. People can't take baths. They can't wash their dishes. They can't do anything without bottled water. You can be assured that Niagara understands the value of this commodity in California. The last thing I want to say is there are other ways for the city to create revenue. We need creative solutions. We need, people who can come up with solutions on how to bring business into the city to create a bigger tax base, etc. Bond issues, giving corporations the ability to come here, the real estate tax abatements, whatever. This is a beautiful, beautiful part of the United States. I moved here because New York City is becoming a garbage dump. And it's gorgeous up here. There's an abundance of nature. It's just a beautiful place to be. And the city has loads of opportunity to get revenue because of what we've got here. Thanks.
Pat Burns. Kitty McCullough.
Jennifer Schwartzberg was not able to be here. She had to be out of town, and she had prepared a statement, and I'm going to read it. I think many of you know Jennifer because she's been in public life here in Kingston for 7 or 8 years. As a taxpayer and resident of Kingston, a parent and a professional urban planner and policymaker, I consider it my civic duty to provide testimony regarding this proposal to sell our water to a private company. The taxpayers of this community have financed this natural resource for over a century. It belongs to us. And despite the authority the water department has to manage it, this water is a public good. There are many unanswered questions about the Niagara proposal, and it would not be responsible for our leaders to make decisions before carefully examining and understanding its impacts. The availability of water and capacity of our Cooper Lake Reservoir are not the only impacts of this proposal. Particularly with our climate and environment facing many uncertainties, we should have all the facts and a thorough evaluation of any proposal. Across the United States, communities have been fighting and winning against similar proposals. Why? Because bottled water is dangerous for public health. Our environment, and may cost us and the communities around us more than it can ever provide to offset the benefits promised by this proposal. Economic development depends on a high-quality place and high-quality jobs. According to highly credible studies, bottled water plants employ few people, and the jobs they create are low-paying and dangerous. Food and Water Watch, a Washington-based think tank, found that bottled water factories employ, on an average, only 24 people, and the typical salary of a bottled water worker is at least $10,000 less than that of typical manufacturing plants. Furthermore, we must thoroughly examine the hidden costs of any proposal. An independent economic analysis of a very similar proposed Nestle bottling plant in California found that the truck traffic, congestion, increased road maintenance, additional services, the generation of wastewater by the plant, and numerous other factors would end up imposing costs and obligations to the community that would outweigh the benefits. I hope you're not going to act without the same due diligence. The bottling plant proposal was defeated after a protracted 6-year battle. The Niagara plant proposed has been quickly moved forward and has seeked regional economic development funds before meeting the obligations set forth in several state laws and regional plans regarding the impacts of the proposal. Our community certainly has the concerned and capable citizens needed to demonstrate all the factors required for a responsible decision. In environmental terms, bottled water goes against everything we've been working to achieve in Kingston and the region to be stewards of our environment. Kingston's climate action plan calls for us to reduce our carbon emissions 40% by 2030. Bottling water uses as much as 2,000 times more energy intensive than tap water production. Back in 2007, it was estimated that the industry used up to 54 million barrels of oil to produce the bottled water consumed in the U.S. Consumption keeps rising. Clean, safe tap water is being threatened by this explosion of privatized water. As a smart, creative community, we can find other ways to maintain our public infrastructure.
Can I ask one of you, Councilman?
Yeah, I think the battery's going on that. One of the councilmen said.
My mother always said I was really loud. Maybe if I don't know. But they're the ones that have to vote. You got our vote. Okay. Okay, we're going to try this one. As a smart, creative community, we can find other ways to maintain our public infrastructure that are not so damaging. How can we be a model community and violate our commitment to the environment? How about a Kingston-based company that uses non-petroleum-based products and puts all the profits into our water infrastructure? If we're given the proper time to explore it, there are surely higher revenue potential to repair our water infrastructure without the environmental cost or profit from our public resources by outside firms. The public trust doctrine holds that certain natural resources belong to all and cannot be privately owned because of their intrinsic value to each individual in society. Each year, private companies reap millions in private profits from exploiting public resources. Bottled water companies generally pay a nominal fee as compared with the public. Cooper Lake is fed by a small stream, not an underwater aquifer. We've experienced an abnormally dry season in Ulster County, and there's no telling what conditions will be going forward. We should apply the precautionary principle, which says that where risks are suspected, we have an obligation to protect the public from harm, especially during drought, agricultural demand, and other unknowns associated with our most precious of resources. Given the uncertainties about the future, economic trends, and potential risks, why should we allow a private company to sell one of the area's most economically valuable assets? Recent growth in Kingston and Ulster County show that our natural amenities are important economic assets. They attract people and firms. Our clean, fresh water is a powerful drawing card for our community. We do not need to sell them to the first or lowest bidders. The concept of surplus water promulgated by the proposal is not relevant here. This is our commodity. Private water companies, referred to as water barons in the media, know that they can come to certain communities to exploit their need for revenue. Once again, Kingston is right to the picking. Perhaps we should charge the company for the real cost of this proposal, including the environmental damages caused by their packaging, and ask for sums based on the enormous profits they earn at the public's expense. According to environmental laws and their principles, the public's right to this most critical of resources is paramount. This will challenge the current administration and decision makers at every level to evaluate whether they are willing to risk them. I urge Kingston's leaders to consider these decisions very carefully and only with full knowledge of all the facts and consequences. Water is our most precious resource, and its availability to our community is our highest priority. It is a public good that demands our protection. I just want to add one thing to what Jennifer has said here. We don't need this kind of jobs. We can create our own jobs, and if you would look at some of the things that are being created here, I think a lot of you probably know that Rick Dragon just bought another building that will be put back on the tax rolls after he gets his preservation credits, because he has 24 employees and he's growing. Ellen Bogan, R&F and Caustics, Bailey's, Ceramics, these people ship all over the world. Arts Manufacturing, like manufacturing in industrial terms, is providing 60 jobs with very little assistance in Midtown. We can create our own jobs, and I urge you to please tell the mayor, encourage the mayor, and my kind to tell the governor that this concept of Startup New York that's going to forgive, and please go to Startup New York. It's in big type right there on the front of their website. They're going to get their property taxes, their franchise fees, their income taxes, and the income taxes of their employees for 10 years, and they're also going to get a grant to build their plant and their pipeline. That's our money. That's your money. Those are your tax dollars that you're paying with. And we're going to create private wealth for a standalone corporation or for Nestle. That is not how we create jobs in Kingston. That is not how we revitalize Kingston. Thank you so much for listening.
Hello, I'm Catherine Steve, ladies and gentlemen, council, and people behind me in the audience. We are all together. There's not one of us in this room, or maybe there are 5 or 6 people represented by the water company that came here just to make their presence known. We are all together. We do not want this. When this water company comes in, it's not doing anything for anybody good. Nothing, except maybe some of you. I don't know. What I'm going to say is that we are all together. I collected the names, and we will be back. We will be back, and we will organize, and we will not allow this to happen. Be strong. When these people come in with their bottled company, they're going to sell that water for 1,000 to 2,000 times what it's worth. 1. 2, they're going to fill up the whole area. They're going to drain the lake dry when we have a water problem. And we will. We have climate problems already. It's climate dysfunction. We do not know what next year is going to be like.
in Arizona, out west. They're buying all their water. A friend of mine came to visit from Arizona, ready to take a shower, importing the water from Colorado. That's not a fair thing for people to do to other people. Representatives need to represent the people. When this company leaves this, when the water's dried up at Cooper Lake, they're going to pick up and leave. We can't.